Dutch government is ready to seize 600 farms at gunpoint as part of the Great Reset. By force, the Dutch government announced plans to seize 600 farms throughout the country as part of the Great Reset agenda. Former Deputy Prime Minister Johan Remkes says he plans to follow the advice from the government's mediator to meet the nitrogen demands of the European Union, EU, which aims to phase out the use of nitrogen, calling it a pollutant. So this will happen in most of the European Union countries, as we would expect. In response, Farmers Defence Force leader Mark van der Over says he and others will take to the streets in opposition to the new standards, which unfairly dubs nitrogen as something harmful when it's really just a common fertilizer agent that plants used to grow and thrive on. The Dutch government claims is that nitrogen is harming sensitive environmental areas located close to heavy nitrogen emitters. Those farms, officials say, must be relocated away from the protected locales. Van der Over argues that this claim is completely wrong and that nitrogen was never considered a pollutant until very recently, when suddenly it started taking the blame for global warming. If Remkes continues with the EU scheme, Over says the nation's farmers will give the old-fashioned gas again, count on that, referring to the widespread movement of tractors throughout the European state. Will Dutch farmers win the fight against the green globalism? Just about all of the concerns of farmers amid this conflict have gone completely ignored, the Farmers Defence Force leader lamented, and he claims the globalist government of Prime Minister Mark Rutte imposes far too much on businesses. Attempts to force farmers to uproot their families and relocate, if they can even find a place to relocate, is a red line, added the organization's spokesman Sieta van Kempema. Remkes, meanwhile, is defending his proposals, though he admits they come at a cost. He says under the EU's so-called green agenda, the Netherlands will be locked up because it will be legally almost impossible to issue permits. Not for houses, not for farms, not for roads, not for anything, it seems. I write this with a heavy heart, but I see no other way, Remkes said. I don't expect the agricultural sector will be happy with this report. Back in July, the Dutch farmer protests, as they were called, saw tractors converge on major cities throughout the Netherlands to make the voices of farmers heard. Many of them dumped manure in front of government buildings and along highways in protest of the anti-nitrogen agenda. Rutte had announced that at the time that by 2030, Netherlands will see 50% fewer nitrogen emissions due to forced farm closures and relocations. This aligns with the EU's Natura 2000 scheme, which requires all EU member states to remove industry, including farming, from areas deemed to be of ecological importance. Some farms will have to cut emissions up by 95% in order to meet that standard, which would basically force them to close. As much as 30% of all livestock will need to go, depriving the country of sustenance. So this will happen to all the European member states. People will not have food to eat. Dutch political commentator Eva Vlaardingerbroek says her country is being used as a testing ground for the World Economic Forum Great Reset concept. Let's remember that Holland supplies 40% of all of Europeans' food. Now, all of these policies are out of those situations that they're being implemented in our country first. We are sort of a pilot country together with Canada for this agenda, she said. Vlaardingerbroek added that her government's land seizure plans actually have more to do with setting up new housing for migrants than with saving the country from so-called climate change. That's a very big, strong statement. This is by Sean Adeltebay on News Punch. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.